I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch Network, and this is a special edition. We will be joined live momentarily by Michael Cohen, and Michael Cohen was just seen leaving the Manhattan District Attorney's office. We are going to ask Michael Cohen all about this meeting. How was it arranged? What can you tell us about the meeting? Who was the team there? All of the questions that you want answered, we will be asking Michael Cohen, who's had this meeting. Does it mean that Alvin Bragg, the Manhattan District Attorney, has renewed interest in a criminal prosecution of Donald Trump? We know that he's added some top prosecutors to the team like Matthew Colangelo and others. Does this mean a criminal prosecution of Donald Trump is imminent on the heels of multiple felony convictions against the Trump organization? Alvin Bragg and his team did a very, very strong job in that prosecution, humiliating Donald Trump's lawyers there. The jury absolutely hated the Trump organization lawyers. The whole Teflon Don BS was utterly exposed during the criminal prosecution of the Trump organization. Now the question is, what comes next? We have with us now Michael Cohen, host of the Mea Culpa podcast and author of Michael Cohen Revenge. How Donald Trump weaponized the U.S. Department of Justice against his critics. Available now in all bookstores and online. Michael Cohen, welcome to the MeidasTouch Network. Welcome to the podcast where you host the Mea Culpa podcast. It's great to have you here.
Good to see you, Ben. Good to see
you.
So
let's talk about this meeting, and let's just start with, how did this meeting come about? Who contacted who? How was this even arranged?
So a couple of weeks ago, Lanny Davis, who is my lawyer, you may remember him from the House Oversight Committee hearing. He was hanging out over my left shoulder, camera left, so to speak. He contacted me and he stated that the district attorney's office would appreciate if I would agree to come in and to meet with the new team that's there to ask me some questions and to discuss several things. And I spoke with, again, Lanny, and we had a few back and forth conversations about it and agreed to do it. And it was set up by the Manhattan District Attorney's Office for today.
So let's clear up any misconceptions out there. They reached out to you through your lawyer, Lanny Davis. And Michael, when was the last
the notion,
time...
Ben, in all fairness, the notion, and you would know this as well as a lawyer, it's very rare that a individual contacts, whether it's the DA, the AG, or any governmental agency, and says, hey, I'd like to come in. Let's not forget that I had met with the district attorney's office 13 times prior to today. And this was, of course, the first time that I'm meeting with Alvin Bragg's team over, at the DA's office.
And so, Michael, the gap between those last meetings where you met about 13 times with those prosecutors under the Cy Vance group and this meeting today was what? It was over a year, wasn't it?
It is over a year. And you'll remember the last time that I had any communication was slightly before the Mark Pomeranz Carrie Dunn resignation.
And look,
those
not
were the two former prosecutors.
You've said it in your book. You've said it. Yeah. You've said it here on the podcast. That gap in time, admittedly, did cause you some concern that it was taking, that you hadn't been contacted. The Pomeranz and Dunn, they leave. That concerned you, didn't it?
Well, the concern, it should really be for everybody, for all of the listeners of both, Meidas, as well as Mea Culpa, as well as for the entire country. The concern should be that this is an investigation that just sort of stalled. Well, like I said to you off camera, one of the things that I did is I made a promise today to the district attorney's office that I would not go into the sum and substance of our conversations. I wouldn't discuss too many of the topics, or I wouldn't discuss the topics or the questions that were posed to me, and that I would actually keep the bulk of my opinions to myself. But you are right. Much of this is discussed in my book, Revenge, as part of the overall scenario of Donald Trump's involvement in basically every single aspect of all of these improper actions.
Let's talk about what we can about this meeting today. Michael, how long were you there for? There's some conflicting reports out there. How long were you there?
And it was somewhere in the area of around 2.5 hours, give or take a few minutes.
Were you doing a lot of the talking, or were other people doing talking, or how was that going down?
Well, it was a relatively large group, and so I was asked a series of questions, and a lot of it was introductory, as I don't believe that this is going to be a one and done scenario. And so everybody wanted to get comfortable with one another. And again, the conversation then ensued, and I suspect that there will be more forthcoming.
So there, you think there will likely be more meetings between you and them? You left with that impression?
That's the impression, sure. I mean, it would only make sense. I got to tell you, we've both been, as many people have been, somewhat critical of Alvin Bragg in the fact that it has been now about a year and nothing sort of has happened. But then again, how many times have we also used the same language by saying that the wheels of justice turn slow, but eventually they do come full circle? We've now seen coming out of the district attorney's office, and you mentioned it in your intro, two very significant decisions. One against Alan Weisselberg, who stands to be charged with potentially additional issues if, in fact, there's information, corroborating documentation, and so on, that he might need to provide testimony to. I'm trying to be very cautious in terms of what I say, because again, I had promised them that I would not, speak about this or the topics of the conversations. But there's a lot that's going on here. They are an incredible team. I felt the same when I had spent, obviously, quite a bit of time with the previous team of Pomerantz and Dunn, and there's also Shinerock. I feel very comfortable that this team is going to look at everything, and if in fact that they end up proceeding forward, that it will be a very strong case.
I think that's going to be very reassuring for the public to hear, because lots of people spoke very positively about Pomerantz and Dunn and that team. And so the impression that you left after meeting with this team is that they're very serious, and you have equal confidence in this new team as you did in the Pomerantz Dunn team.
Yeah, I have a lot of confidence. And remember, I had spent 10 sessions with Pomerantz, actually 13, 3 of them while I was in Otisville, and then 10 when I was released after, of course, the unconstitutional remand, 10 additional meetings with them. So I've spent a lot more time with the previous team than my one meeting from today. But if my gut is accurate, I think they're a very qualified, competent, and yes, I do have a lot of faith in this team.
You said there was a lot of people. Is there any more detail you can provide? Was Alvin Bragg there the whole time? Was there?
Yes, I really, yeah, Ben, I love, me, I don't like to shy away from an answer, especially when I know it. At this point, I really just have to be respectful of the district attorney's office's request that I leave this meeting, or that I left the meeting, and that most of what we discussed, if not all of it, including the topics, including the people, that just remain amongst us for now. because I do
Absolutely.
believe that very soon Alvin Bragg will come out, or his office will come out with their own statement, and I want to respect, that.
Well, I definitely wouldn't be doing my job for the Midas Mighty if I at least didn't ask. But what I gather that you're saying, though, is that this wasn't for show. I mean, the fact that you're there, you left with the impression that this is a serious group of people. This is a serious team that had serious questions for you. Is that fair to say?
Oh, absolutely. I don't believe that this was for show. In fact, I think that things, if this was for show, it would have a detrimental effect as opposed to the effect that it appears to be having right now. I think they are seriously reviewing everything. And one thing that Alvin Bragg and this entire team want to ensure is that they dot all their I's, cross all their T's, and to ensure that the best case be put forward, no different than they did with the Weisselberg or the Trump organization / Trump payroll cases.
There's a lot of reporting out now as well that the Manhattan District Attorney's Office has contacted Keith Davidson. And for those who don't know who that is, the former attorney of Stormy Daniels before the whole Avenatti fiasco. Have you heard that? Have you heard that other than in the reporting, or can you speak to that at all?
Yeah. So again, I hate doing this, and it's really making me a little bit tongue tied. I really am trying to be as respectful to the district attorney as I possibly can. And so, where I learned it from, at this point, I'm just going to have to say it's irrelevant, other than to say that your statement is not inaccurate.
Okay. And look, you've laid out in your book, Revenge, you've laid out a lot of the criminal conduct you've observed. And of course, you talked about it in your congressional testimony. And so a lot of this is public. Let's set aside for a second any communications that may have existed with the Manhattan District Attorneys. Let's just talk about what is in your book and things you've said publicly to remind our audience of some of the crimes that you observed, both in terms of, the Stormy Daniels interaction, but also more broadly, fraudulent valuations, other direct tax schemes that Trump was engaged in. Set aside anything you may have told the DA. What have you spoken about publicly, just to remind our audience the types of things you observed?
Well, one of the things that, and again, now we're just talking about the book Revenge, which
Just the book.
basically is the forensic dissection of the most corrupt investigation and prosecution of a United States citizen in a really long time. And it starts, of course, with the Steele dossier and goes all the way through to the unconstitutional remand when I refused to waive my First Amendment constitutional rights. Now, throughout the book, we talk about the various prosecutors that were involved, including Jeffrey Berman, who I filed a bar complaint against here in New York, and I'm still waiting for some sort of a response, including just an acknowledgement by the Bar Association, whereby, and it's comical, Jeffrey Berman is bragging about the fact that he was contacted by the Attorney General of the United States at the time, by the Justice Department, and that he towed the line and did not comply completely with their requests, which was to alter the charges against me and some other things, simply so that he could keep his job. I mean, that's his own words, which to me it's incredulous. And worse than that, this is a guy who had already stepped aside because he recused himself based upon alleged conflicts. The fact that he's even speaking about it and elected to ignore everything that was going on, not contact the FBI or law enforcement, that he was being pressured by the Justice Department to do things in SDNY cases, and then instead to hold on to that information for 4 years so that he could write a book about it. I mean, that's either unethical illegal, or both. And so, like I said, I've already contacted the Bar Association because his actions are, like I said, they're either unethical or illegal.
Look, I'm not sure if you saw this. I'm sure you did. In a recent post, Donald Trump mentioned you by name, so you're clearly in his head right now. And I'll try to pull up the exact post, but he basically called you a disaster as a lawyer, and he then mentioned the FBI raid and basically said at the same time it's the fake Bureau of Investigation, but then mention that you're a disaster. Did you see that post? And what
I
do you?
didn't. I didn't. I would love for you to be able to put it up. I was just on MSNBC
I've
with
got it right
Nicole
now, and
Wallace.
so this
That
is
would be great.
so this is what it says. Let me read it to you, and then I'll ask for your reaction. This is what he posted on Truth Social about 3 days ago. He says, "Until now, I always thought that lawyers had a very special and revered place in our country, but not anymore. It all began with the lawyer from hell, Michael Cohen, whose office was viciously raided by the fake Bureau of Investigation early one morning, and whose files and just about everything else was taken from him on a case unrelated to me. Not too long thereafter, and being very brave, he screamed, 'I represent President Trump. I'll tell you anything, but please leave me alone.' Since then, it has been open season on lawyers, their files, and their lives. They are attacked by the radical left thugs at a level never seen before in our country. Look at what they've done to Rudy Giuliani, who turned out to be right about so much, including the laptop from hell. So many others also all tried to, quote, get Trump, due simply to Trump derangement syndrome." What do you make of that?
It's an
There it is right
interesting.
there,
Yeah,
Cohen, if you
it's
want
an
to read.
interesting. Yeah, thank you. It's an interesting ramble. In one respect, it praises me. It doesn't necessarily criticize me. It was a horrible raid against me, but of course he has to exonerate himself, right? It's just a very circular type of, which is how Donald thinks. It's very circular in nature, right? I've always thought that lawyers had a very special, place, but I want to be very clear about something. I received absolutely zero benefit for any of the testimony that I have provided to the 8 different congressional committees, to the district attorney and the attorney general. And I asked for nothing. So his comments are absolutely inaccurate. I refused to sign a 5K1 cooperation agreement with the Southern District of New York, but nevertheless, I still provided them with all of the information that they asked me for, including hours and hours and hours of testimony. And it's that same group of SDNY prosecutors, most of which are no longer there. They're now getting $1 million payouts by various different law firms and companies. The few that are still there, they elected not to continue prosecuting Donald for his participation in the various different alleged crimes. And in fact, there were a whole series of sealed indictments that they were sitting with on this hush money issue that they ultimately closed out and said that there wasn't enough information for them to prosecute Trump and others on, which of course we know is complete nonsense.
And what also seems to be complete nonsense, doesn't seem, I think it is complete nonsense. Pull up that statement one more time. Basically, where he says that the files that were taken from him on a case unrelated to me, he acts like you were not like representing him at that time. I mean, clearly everything was related, was related to him.
That's the point I want to say. It's circular nonsense. For example, what were some of the big topics? How about the campaign finance violation, the hush money payment to Stormy Daniels, the hush money payment to Karen McDougal, the Trump Tower Moscow project, and a series of other things? And so, of course, how is that unrelated to him? The only way that you could get an answer to that would be to reach out to Trump. And I assure you that whatever the answer would be, it would be as ridiculous as this Truth Social posting that he just let go.
So here's what we know about your meeting with the Manhattan District Attorney so far. What we know is that they contacted your lawyer, Lanny Davis, asking to speak to you. They reached out to you, point one, correct?
Well, they reached out to Lanny to me. Obviously, one of the things that they tried to do, assuming because I was represented and continued to be by Lanny in this area, they reached out to him because it would be improper for them to reach out to me directly, so they reached out to my counsel. But yes, they did reach out first.
Then you met with them today. You said it was about 2.5 hours. You can't talk about who was specifically in the room, but you mentioned that it was a decent sized room. There was a good group of people there, and that you felt after leaving them the same type of confidence that you had in Pomerantz and Carrie Dunn. Is that all accurate?
Yes, that's accurate. I believe that they are all very competent, and they are interested in fact finding, getting to the truth. And if it comports to what they would decree to be a valid case, then I'm certain they will make their own announcement on this.
And to that end, you believe this is not for show, number one, and you believe that this isn't just the first meeting, but you anticipate that there will be other interactions between you and them. Without getting into detail, at the broadest level, though, is that accurate?
Yes, it's an accurate statement.
So that's all very significant news that's breaking right here. I think that fully explores, unless there's anything else you can tell us about the meeting that is maybe a little bit more, but I think that hits the parameters for now. True?
Yes, and obviously, I would say to the Meidas Mighty, stay tuned. There's obviously going to be more coming out over time, and I intend to share it with the Meidas Mighty, with Bagel Ben and Brett and Jordy in the future, and to the extent that I am permitted. So stay tuned, because this case is clearly not over. And by the way, that statement is not even from me. That's a statement that was made by Alvin Bragg going back to December 7th when he appeared on television and stated so.
Got a very actually important question about the meeting for you that I'm sure is on a lot of people's mind as well. We talked about as much as you could there, but that outfit that you're wearing, that turtleneck, Cohen, you wear that turtleneck to this meeting?
I did, and it's clearly not the regular outfit that you would see me in going to, whether it's the DA's office or on television and so on. It's cold here in New York, and for some reason, I've just been chilled. For whatever the reasons, I've just been exceedingly cold over the last couple of days. No fever, no COVID, no anything. Just for some reason, it's I've just been cold, and so the turtleneck keeps me good and warm. And I didn't know whether or not their offices would be warm or cold, and so not to sit there and shake and be distracted, I put on this very, very warm and comfy sweat.
A lot of thought going into the outfit. That's that's good to hear. While I got you on, I got to hit at least a few more topics here. The depositions, the transcript portions that were released in the E. Jean Carroll case. Did you get a chance to read Donald Trump's testimony there? I mean, sounds like a complete maniac. Number one. He's going to be horrible in front of a jury. If you read it, what was your reaction to some of
So
those
I have not read the deposition as of yet. I'm doing a few other things as well.
Busy?
As preparing for some other things I'm doing as well. So I did not have the chance, but if there's something specific that you want I've read enough, and I've been involved with enough of Trump's testimonies and depositions and so on. He makes for a terrible witness. And you could sit and you could prep him for a month. But when he sits down, he's going to say whatever he wants at that moment, which makes him, like Harry Litman said on MSNBC today, the most or the worst client that a lawyer could possibly have.
Marjorie Taylor Greene being appointed by Kevin McCarthy and the Republicans to the Oversight Committee and the Homeland Security Committee. You have someone who is a 9/11 conspiracy theorist, someone who follows QAnon, someone who harasses the survivors of school shootings. I could go on, but now in committees that will be getting some of our most classified information. Does that concern you? And what's your reaction to that?
Well, the fact that Marjorie Taylor Greene continues to be reelected to a congressional position is something that scares me. But it's not just her, right? I mean, the fact that she is on any committee should be terrifying, not just to Democrats, but to Republicans and independents as well. And then, of course, there's dear old, whatever he wants to call himself today, George Santos. I mean, he's another one. It blows my mind that someone who has lied to the extent that George Santos did, that he could forget about being placed on committees, that he could even remain as a member of Congress. This is a man who is now representing his constituents, which are Americans and our country. It's a complete embarrassment. It's an embarrassment in front of the whole world that this wackadoodle, is there and wearing a congressional pin.
Well, you say setting aside the committees, but it was just announced that the Republicans have put him on some fairly prestigious committees. So not only are they not telling him to resign, they're promoting him and giving him rewards. It was just announced he'll be on the Small Business Committee, based, of course, on the small businesses that he's led.
That's the part that, Ben, is absolutely stunning to me, that they would put him on this. I mean, this is like sending a diabetic into a candy store. I mean, it makes absolutely no sense to me at all. The man is under investigation right now for going from $50,000 a year in salary to somehow amassing $11 million, and nobody knows who, what, when, where, and how he acquired those funds. This is, to me, the worst. I mean, it would almost be like making him the head of the President's Council on Physical Fitness and Health. I mean, you've seen the guy. I mean, it's absurd. It's asinine. And I don't know if it's to stick the finger in the eyes of the American public that they would do this, but to put a guy who is now literally 1 week in as a member of Congress, who got there by lying. I mean, let's look at some of the lies: that he had a family member who was killed in the Holocaust, another family member killed in 9/11, that he was a volleyball player at Baruch, and that they destroyed Harvard and Yale. Now, interestingly enough, the fact that he even made such a ridiculous comment, they don't even play in the same conference. I didn't know that Baruch was Ivy and that they play in the Ivy. The whole thing, he had a double knee replacement. I mean, that's just to name some of the easier ones. It is so insane that this man, who wouldn't know the truth if it bit him in his ass, is now placed on small business. I mean, I don't understand. I truly don't understand what McCarthy is thinking, what Jim Jordan is thinking. The best thing that they can do to show some strength for the Republican Party would have been to oust him. That's what they should have done. Instead of, not just did they welcome him in with open arms, as you just appropriately stated, they're also rewarding him by putting him on committees. How do you put somebody on committees after this information has been released without any sort of knowledge as to why he made these statements and what are the repercussions? It's, to me, none of this makes any sense. It's, again, part of the massive embarrassment that the way that we look in front of the world.
They also put him on the Space and Science Committee, so he got 2 assignments there. And there he is. I don't know if you know this, Cohen.
I don't know if you know this, right? But He's also a
Astronaut.
licensed astronaut. Yeah.
He is an astronaut. He's been to the moon 3 times in the past 5 years. I don't know if you knew that about him. And
He's truly a Renaissance man. I mean, he's an athlete. I mean, I'm not sure. He worked for Goldman Sachs and for Citigroup, and he was a top trader. And I mean, he's an astronaut. He's an ass, that's for sure. But it's ridiculous. The whole thing is just so silly. And the fact that we can sit here and make fun of this is bad in and of itself. I mean, it's one thing if it's so ridiculous.
Going full circle,
I'm just
Cohen.
completely flabbergasted.
Going
that they
full
would
circle,
be this,
though. Yeah, where we
Yes.
started, though, where we started to me is also where we end, because to me, all of this, the Marjorie Taylor Greens, the Kevin McCarthy's, the George Santos's, the Jim Jordan, the fact that people aren't outraged that Jim Jordan's running the judiciary, like that there's even more crazy that's not even like completely outrageous. But you could go on and just name any of them. Like we could spend a whole podcast. You could go to Gosar, you could go to Biggs, you could go to Perry, you could go to Boebert, you can go to Comer, like just keep on going down in each one of them. But don't you think that all exists now because of Trump? Everything that Trump touches dies. And this is the party that he runs, that he's created. Don't all roads here lead right back to where we started, one Donald J. Trump?
Well, yeah, I don't know if I would say it in such broad language. Clearly, Trump lied to the American people. Look, the one thing that I respect about you and the Meidas Mighty, and of course your brothers, is that on this program, on Meidas Network and the MeidasTouch and so on, there's no innuendo, and it's something that I talk about on Mea Culpa as well. I don't accept innuendo. There's no misinformation, disinformation. We work off of facts. And the fact of the matter is that Donald Trump lied to the American people like 40,000 times. It was like 8 to 10 lies per day, and each one was significant. Now, does that mean that he opened the Pandora's box to others like Santos to lie? I think Santos is just a nut job. And I think he's a liar whether Donald existed or not. The problem that I see the Pandora's box that Donald opened is that he's legitimized lying to the public, to your constituents and to the country. And he's made it acceptable. Yeah, who cares? So what? He claimed he was an astronaut. So he claimed that he was a scholarship volleyball player to Baruch College. And I wasn't even aware that Baruch had a top tier Division I volleyball team and that they were part of the Ivies. And it's the level of stupidity and the lies that Santos promotes it's incredible. So, but do I want to blame Donald for the lies that people like Santos are making? No, I think Santos is just a liar, and we all know that they're lies. He's not Jewish, right? He didn't play volleyball. He didn't work for Goldman. He didn't work at Citigroup. He didn't do any of the things. He's not an astronaut. He didn't do anything that he claimed to do. And to be honest with you, though, I do have to say shame on whoever it was that was running against him, whether it's a Republican or for the nomination or Democrat in the general election, because this is obviously easy stuff to disprove. And clearly, whoever was doing the vetting for that candidate should lose their job. There's no doubt about that one.
Michael Cohen, I want to thank you for sharing this news with MeidasTouch first, or very close to first. MSNBC tried to get to you early, but you haven't given the level of detail that you gave here to the Meidas Mighty and everybody here. I know you've got a very busy evening ahead of you, and you've got a very busy year ahead of you. And one of the things that I'm so privileged to share with all the Meidas Mighty out there is, as you said, this probably is just the first of many. can't get into it. Meetings to come, which means you'll be here sharing a lot with the Meidas Mighty. I just have a great time. Bagel Ben, Turtleneck Mike, as some people are calling it.
Yeah, I like that.
Turtleneck, we are, I have a lot of fun doing this with you. Any final words before we go?
No, just to the Meidas Mighty, stay the course, stay on, this Meidas network. We're going to be back. We'll be talking about it. And the more that I'm permitted to disclose, I will be disclosing it here, with Bagel Ben and the brothers. And keep the faith, because as I said before, and I'm going to repeat it because it's worth saying, I know we are all frustrated, and we all have the right to be frustrated at the extent of time that Donald has managed to push off any of this responsibility for his actions. But the wheels of justice turn slowly, but they do come full circle. We saw that with Weisselberg. We saw that with Trump.org. We saw it with Trump payroll. We've seen it several times now, and I suspect that more is forthcoming.
Make sure you hit the subscribe button. If you're not subscribed to the MeidasTouch YouTube channel, I don't know what you're doing. Make sure you subscribe to Michael Cohen's podcast, Mea Culpa. Search it wherever you get your podcast. And if you haven't bought Revenge by Michael Cohen, How Donald Trump Weaponized the U.S. Department of Justice Against His Critics, make sure you get it now, because
Bagel Ben, this book is seriously, and I say this all the time, this book is seriously the roadmap that people have to read. But one of the other things that I would say that is on the Meidas merchandise store that I would strongly suggest to all of the Meidas Mighty that you purchase the Donald Trump Mea Culpa in prison shirt while reading Revenge, because that is the 1-2 punch that is going to put America back on track.
Yeah, you get your official gear. You could get, that's a real shirt, by the way. And from time to time, Cohen wears that when he's not wearing the turtleneck, and when it's some nicer weather in Manhattan, he wears that shirt, the Mar-a-Lago Correctional Facility, the official Mea Culpa podcast gear. You can get that at store.meidastouch.com. It makes a great gift to friends, family, coworkers, and even treat yourself. Store.meidastouch.com. Cohen, final words?
I should have worn that to the DA's office today. Except it was
next
too cold.
time.
Next time is right.
Next time. I'm Ben Meiselas, joined by Michael Cohen. This is a special edition of the MeidasTouch Network. Thank you all for watching this live. We will be back, of course, and I'm sure we'll be back, myself and Turtleneck Mike and Bagel Ben soon. Until next time, shout out to the Meidas Mighty.